Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am delighted to be with you again on a Tuesday, bringing you another author interview. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope your week is off to a great start. It's not too hot wherever you are, and that life is going generally okay. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. That definitely helps the algorithm, gets this podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. Also, if you're interested in helping the podcast and the network as a whole in another way, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip or a donation. As I said, that helps the network as a whole, not just this podcast. But if you are interested in doing that, it is, as I said, greatly appreciated. You can leave a question or a comment while you're there as well, and I'm happy to engage with those. I love hearing from you and responding to any questions or comments you might have. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you, as always, for every bit of support you have given this podcast over the years. It is very, very much appreciated. So how is your week going? We are plowing through August already. My mom said something about how is next weekend already, whatever date that's going to be. I mean, we're already in mid-August by Friday, which means if we're in mid-August, it's basically Christmas, right? They'll be here before we know it. At any rate, hubby is home. I went to the airport and got him on Wednesday. His flight went fine. Everything went well this time, so that was good. He had a good trip back for the most part. There were some hiccups, some bumps along the way during the time, but overall he had a good trip. He was able to spend time with family, and thank you again for all your kind words about his father. I really do appreciate everything. But he's home now, which is great, except that, of course, being on a plane, trapped with lots and lots of people and lots of germs, he has a cold, a nasty cold. He thought it was getting better yesterday, but it is not. He is feeling much, much worse today. Lots of fluids, so we shall see what happens, and hopefully this doesn't last very long. I know I keep looking down. There's something strange going on my monitor. I was just trying to figure out what that was. I'll figure it out. At any rate, let's talk about the author interview for today. Today I am speaking to, give me 1 second. Again, things on my monitor not cooperating. This week I am speaking with Cynthia Pelayo about her book. It's called Vanishing Daughters. A haunted woman stalked by a serial killer confronts the horrors of fairy tales and the nightmares of real life in a breathtaking novel of psychological suspense by a Bram Stoker Award-winning author. It started the night journalist Briar Thorne's mother died in their rambling old mansion on Chicago's South Side. The nightmares of a woman in white pleading to come home, music switched on in locked rooms, and the panicked fear of being swallowed by the dark. Bry has almost convinced herself that these stirrings of dread are simply manifestations of grief and not the beyond world of ghostly impossibilities her mother believed in. And more tangible terrors still lurk outside the decaying Victorian gravestone. A serial has claimed the lives of 51 women in the Chicago area. When Bree starts researching the murders, she meets a stranger who tells her there's more to her sleepless nights than bad dreams. They hold the key to putting ghosts to rest and stopping a killer. But the killer has caught on and is closing in, and if Bree doesn't answer the call of the dead soon, she'll be walking among them. So this is a thriller. It has a paranormal, supernatural layer to it. It is also the story of a woman who is grieving the loss of her mother, which we just a couple weeks ago we had another book dealing with grief as well. So similar themes in this one in terms of the often arbitrary timelines that society puts on grief and people who are in grief. There is some of that in this story as well, and Cynthia will talk a little bit about that as we go through this. But lots of layers of a woman who is grieving. So she's not always sure of her mental state, but there's other things happening. She's back in her family home. You heard music playing, things happening, dreams of a woman in white, lots of stuff going on that is not making sense to her. Is it supernatural? Is she deep in the throes of grief? Well, yes. To everything, yes. There's a lot of different things happening in this book. So let's let Cynthia talk about it. Again, the book is Vanishing Daughters, and the author is Cynthia Pelayo. Let's go now to that interview. Hi, Cynthia. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am excited to talk about your book, Vanishing Daughters. Before we get to the book, though, would you take some time just to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Cynthia Pelayo. I am a Bram Stoker Award and International Latino Book Award winning author and poet. I live in Chicago. I write genre blending novels that incorporate crime, detective, thriller, mystery, and horror.
Okay, yes. As the Bram Stoker Award would indicate, I mean, I would hope Bram Stoker would have something to do with horror in some fashion. Yeah. So, can you give an overview of Vanishing Daughters?
Sure. So Vanishing Daughters follows Briar Thorne, who has returned to her ancestral home after her mother died, and she's grieving her mother quite intensely. And she's also taken on this massive crumbling mansion on Chicago's South Side that her family built many years ago. Her family wealth came from like the Zenith radio fortune. And so she's under a lot of stress and pressure because it is just her. She's a freelancer, she's a health writer, and she's having hallucinations, sleep disturbances, all that she's attributing to grief. However, as she starts researching several missing persons cases, she also starts having nightmares or dreams of a woman in white asking her to take her back home. And soon, Briar becomes the target of a suspected serial killer in the area.
Yeah. So you've got almost two novels in one because you've got like this sort of suspense crime thriller serial killer, but you've also got the supernatural element to it. What was your initial inspiration for the book?
So most of my novels are going to contain multiple themes. So there'll be either 3 or 4 layers, and you can read it as its own novel from start to finish and interpret it however you want to interpret it. But then I also have generally like a true crime component. And the true crime component in this novel is the real cases of 51 murdered women who in the south side of Chicago whose cases haven't been solved. That's one layer. Another layer is the legend of the vanishing hitchhiker. And in the Chicagoland area, we have a very famous vanishing hitchhiker who we call Resurrection Mary. And I wanted to explore what it is we do to women who have been murdered and how we also victimize them in their death by creating like a legend out of them. We have like this vanishing hitchhiker throughout the world. And my thesis is maybe the vanishing hitchhiker throughout these communities was a murdered woman. And it just turned into like these stories that have been passed along generation to generation. Don't walk down that road because you might see the ghost of a woman. And where did this ghost of a woman come from? And then I also have the layer of the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. And my novels are generally, they're not like fairy tale adaptations, they're influenced by fairy tales.
Yes, well, and the name of the main character, Briar Thorne, very clearly, and her mother's name is Aurora, so it's
Correct.
generational with this with the references.
Correct.
Was it so? Did you start with this in this case? Which layer did you start with?
I started with the sleep aspect. I was really fascinated with like sleep disturbances. And so I went back and in my MFA, I studied fairy tales pretty intensely, and I'm working on a doctorate now, and that's going to be my focus is fairy tales. And I went back and I read several variations of Sleeping Beauty. There's like multiple variations of these fairy tales. And we generally assume that Sleeping Beauty wakes up because of the kiss of a prince. But in Charles Perrault's version, she just wakes up. So she doesn't need a man to save her. And I thought that was so cool. And I wanted to do something where a woman saved herself, and not just save herself, but in this novel, like she saves another woman. And I wanted to explore that. So that's where it came from.
Okay, sounds good. Let's talk a little bit more about Briar as the main character. Bri or Bree?
I call her Bree. Yeah, so
the way I said it in my head, but I'm never sure. So what about Bree do you think will resonate with readers?
What's interesting about this character is it's been split, because there have been some people who have said, I can't imagine grieving my mother that way. Like it's like a person, she's made it grieving her mother a personality trait. And then other people have said, wow, I've really captured what it is like to grieve someone. And to the people saying that, I can't imagine grieving someone that intensely, I just think that's sad. That just tells me you've never loved someone so much that you felt not just the loss of them, but you felt a loss of yourself as well. And I wanted to really showcase what grief looks like. And it's not comfortable at all. It's very uncomfortable, and it's very sanitized in the States, and nobody wants to talk about grief and what that does to somebody. And then not only is like, and also like grief is very isolating. Nobody wants to be around somebody that's grieving. And so not only are you dealing with these really intense emotions, but everybody kind of disperses and leaves you alone, and you're just kind of grieving on your own. So I wanted to tell people that I've been there. I understand what it's like to grieve somebody, and I understand also how traumatic it is to be abandoned by multiple people because they don't want to be around you.
Yeah. They said in the intro, grief is a prevalent theme in this book, and it's interesting that it comes so close to my conversation of a couple of weeks ago. The name of the book just completely flew out of my head. I will look it up over the break and let you know, because I don't know what's going on with my brain in terms of memory. But those two books so close together, and they're very similar themes of grief and the timelines that we as a society often put on grief. I just think the timing is always interesting, considering the craziness of my schedule and how far out things get booked. It's always interesting to see parallels between interviews and books. At any rate, when we are going to take our first break of this episode, when we come back, we'll be talking about the fact that grief is only one of the layers. And in this book, there are those multiple layers, as were mentioned before. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Cynthia Pelayo. As we get back into the second segment of this episode, just your second and final reminder that if you want to contribute to the podcast and the network as a whole, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. You're seeing that link next to me in the video that is playing currently, but you're also going to see it scrolling along at the bottom of the screen throughout the episode in case you need a reminder. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. You can leave a tip, a donation, question, comment. I love hearing from you, and your support is always appreciated. Before the break, we were talking about grief and the fact that Cynthia wanted to include the timeline and sometimes the made-up timelines of grief as part of the writing of this story. I did remember the name of the book I was talking about. It's a couple of episodes ago, if you want to look up that interview, if you haven't watched that one already. It's The Shape of What Remains was that book. But very, very, very different books, but similar themes in terms of grief. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Cynthia. But there's also, I mean, yes, her grief is very intense, and I also have experienced grief like that. Many people, I'm sure, have. But there's other layers in this book that intensify her grief. So yeah, she's grieving and she's got other things at play.
Yeah, and I wanted to also talk about what it's like to be grieving, but then you also have all these very high stress things happening in your life. And in Bree's case, she's being tracked down by a serial killer. And she has to maintain her house and she has to maintain her job. So how does she push through and just pull herself together? And it's very difficult to unravel something like this.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point, because it might seem a little bit, I mean, hopefully most of us aren't being hunted down by a serial killer, but we still have to go to the grocery store. We have to go put gas in the car. We have to do all these things when we might be experiencing some level of intense emotion for whatever reason.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
life doesn't just stop. So
it doesn't stop, and it's like this weird. People have called it the fog of grief, where you go out and you mourn somebody and you bury them, and then you come home and everybody's just kind of living their normal life, and it's just like it's shocking. It's like, wow, there's this very big thing to me, and then you're just getting. I mean, at least for me, it was very, very bizarre. Because, I was grieving. I was writing this while I was grieving my father. So I'm grieving my dad. And then I'm getting like messages from people like, hey, let's go. When are you available? Let's go get some lunch. And I'm like, my dad just died. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to be like in order for a whole year. And I think people just don't understand it.
Right. Well, and the other people try to put timelines on grief that are theirs and not the person who's grieving.
Yeah. I was always, I've always been critical of like the 3 days off of work in the United States that you get. But then I honestly saw why, because, people within like a few days were just assuming that I was like back to normal. And it's like, no, it took me probably about a year to psychologically get back to, and you don't really get back from that. It's, it took me about a year to learn to live with it.
Yeah. Well, the first year is the firsts. You have to get through all of the firsts. But then sometimes the seconds are harder. And then even after that, you just never know when it's going to hit you. So it doesn't stop. It just changes.
Oh yeah. There's people think, okay, well maybe Father's Day will be difficult, or depending on who you've lost. Mother's Day. No, it could be like standing in the grocery store, seeing like, this really great, set of ingredients, and you want to pick up the phone and call them and be like, hey, I want to make, oh, you're not there. Yep. Or having some wonderful news to share and reaching for your phone. I had my dad listed on my favorites. I had to remove it because every time I pick it up to like dial someone, and I would just see his name under favorites, and it was just too much. I just had to slowly just remove it.
My parents my parents' house still has a landline, and my cell phone still says mom and dad, because even after 3.5 years, I still haven't quite been able, like like my dad contact with his cell phone I've taken out, but I can't quite take mom and dad and just make it mom. So I get it.
One of the I remember what hit me really hard one day, because my mom was the one that always would sign like the birthday cards and the Christmas cards, and I believe it was my first birthday after my dad died, and I was always used to seeing mom and dad, and just her signing mom. It was like so stark. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. You never know when it's going to hit you. But when you sit down to write and you've got a main character like Brie, but even secondary characters, like you have how much character development do you like to do before you start writing, and how much do you like for the characters to evolve as you write?
I do a lot of pre-work. I mean, I write really fast, and people always are shocked at how fast I write, but that doesn't count. Like, the actual writing, I consider a separate activity than the pre-work. And so
Hmm.
I do a lot of journaling. I will write a lot of sketches and vignettes. I do character interviews. And so I can't really start writing the novel until I know their name. And sometimes I will have a name and I'll start writing and it's not their name. It seems very off. And that's what happened with this character. And when I went back and I reread several variations of Sleeping Beauty, I was like, really? That's it? That's a little on the nose. But when I started writing it, it just felt right. And so, and of course, a lot just really happens as you're writing the character. So there's always the pre-work, and at least for me, I'm an outliner, and a lot of people are just good for them. Stephen King dance, and I don't know how he does it. Good for him. But I have to set everything up beforehand. But as I'm writing, there's also just the discovery of the things. So,
Yeah, makes sense. How about research? What kinds of research did you do for this story?
in terms of research, since this also deals a lot with the history, a lot of different historical components throughout the city of Chicago. So did a lot of history of Archer Avenue, which is thought to be not only one of the most haunted roads in the Chicagoland area, but also in the United States. And so researching, well, why is that? And it just seems to be it was a Native American road, and there were a lot of deaths along that road for various reasons. Immigrants working on developing the Illinois-Michigan Canal. So I did research on that, the actual road. I did research on I wanted to incorporate a family who had been in the Chicagoland area for a long time. And I was like, and they were immigrants. And so I was like, well, who would have had some type of wealth? And the musical component fits in with this. And so I did research on the Zenith radios, which were manufactured here in the Chicagoland area. Also, like how homes were built. Of course, there was the research on like fairy tales.
Yeah.
And her mother, who is an archivist in a way, or restoration archivist. So yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of characters a minute ago, the house really is a character. So can you talk a little bit about its significance as another character in the book?
Yeah, there's been a resurgence of Gothic literature, and I think for a number of reasons. But what always struck me as odd is the concept of the evil haunted house, especially if it's a home that you've lived in for so long. I wanted to write a house that is haunted, but is a loving house. And so a lot of the noises and the things that the house does to her is it's really trying to show her and nudge her along to where she needs to be. So I wanted to write a haunted house that's a loving haunted house, as opposed to like this ominous, scary thing. Because even like my childhood home, I couldn't imagine right now, if it was completely gone and I moved into it, I couldn't imagine a scenario where the house would hate me or be mad at me. It was my childhood home. Of course, it would be happy that I'm back. And I also wanted to show what it means to have memories imprinted in a house as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because there are moments that are very creepy where you're like, oh my gosh, why is she not freaking out more? But at the same time, like what you just said, this is her childhood home. It's been her family's home for generations. So in some ways, she's just like, yeah, okay, this is what's happening now.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas I didn't grow up in that home and I'm like, why are you still there? Get out.
Yeah, I grew up in I grew up in a house that there was a lot of strange activity as well. And I always remember my father kind of shaking it off. He's like, "Yeah, it's just the house. Just ignore it." And
Yeah.
so I was like, "Okay." And so it never was like a scary thing. Um,
Hmm.
it was always that's just the house responding, doing things. And who knows? It could be the land shifting. It could be the wind. Just ignore it. And so that's always been how I thought of those things. So.
Right. What do you think draws you to including like a supernatural element within your stories?
For a long time, and I haven't quite gone back to realism yet. I was a journalist for a long time, and I had to stop writing journalism because of PTSD, and I covered a lot of crime. And I think for me, the supernatural has been an easy way to explore a lot of big ideas and big philosophical concepts because, especially with Vanishing Daughters, it's my way of um, trying to make sense of death without a religious component. And there's a lot of
Mm.
philosophical discussions in there about what it is we are, what happens at the end. And I wanted to do that without the religious component, just like speaking about it from like it's just like a totally scientific, energetic aspect. Like what happens? We are energy. We know that. And so what happened? We all know that energy can never be destroyed. It just turns into something else. And so there's a lot, and that kind of plays into my whole curiosity with ghosts. So.
Hmm. Yeah. I like what she was saying about using supernatural as a way of talking about other themes, other tropes in books. Obviously, the concept of death and the supernatural goes well together because you can talk about life after death, ghosts, energy, all of those sorts of things. But I can see this as a way of exploring a lot of different kinds of topics, but using supernatural as kind of the entry point. I think that's really interesting, and I want to think more about that. So I'm wondering what pairings do you see in terms of topics that you could easily see going together in books, supernatural and other types of topics. I'd be interested to hear what you had, what ideas you come up with. We're going to take our second break of this episode. When we come back, what Cynthia is currently working on, her work in progress. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Cynthia Pelayo. Before the break, Cynthia was talking about some of the reasons that she enjoys writing supernatural or books with supernatural elements in them, and how they how those elements tie in with the other elements of the plots and the novels. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Cynthia. What are you currently working on?
I just submitted a couple weeks ago a historical novel, which is like a continuation of Peter Pan. It's historical, it takes place in 1915. Wendy is in her 20s, and World War One is raging outside of her home, and Peter Pan is not a good person or a good thing, and so he returns.
I can see how that would not be, the best thing. I can see that. So you've been a journalist, so you've written in various capacities for a while, it sounds like. But what pushed you to write for publication, to write fiction for publication?
I always wanted to be a fiction writer. I was steered away from it in high school. I wanted to major. I'm first generation in the mainland. I'm from Puerto Rico, and so I was the first person in my family to step foot in a college classroom. So to convince my parents that I was going to go study art was not a good thing.
Right.
And it was like, no, you have to do something that's tangible. Journalism, because you can pivot to marketing and you can pivot to public relations. And even like my guidance counselors pushed me away from fiction writing. And so I did journalism. I did my 2 decades worth of the corporate job at the corner office downtown, and I hated it. And I pursued an MFA in writing, and I started just writing fiction at night since like 2008. And it's what I've always wanted to do. I can't imagine. It's what I do now full time, and I can't imagine ever wanting to do anything else. I like telling stories. So
Yeah. Any particular piece of advice you'd give to someone who wants to write?
I think initially it can be uncomfortable, because when we sit down to create, we're sitting down with all of these like things that we've heard throughout our life, like criticisms. And it's something that you have to work on not only daily, but hourly, by minute, on shutting out those criticisms. And the reason a lot of people will critique you or tell you you can't do it is because they are comfortable or they can't do it, and they're comfortable in their day-to-day life. And so seeing someone that's going to do something that they've probably never seen kind of feel like a threat to them. And so you just have to shut out those voices and devote the time to write. You just sit down and do it. It's uncomfortable at first, but if you haven't written in a while, just write a sentence today. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Just write one sentence today. Buy a pack of note cards, and every day, tell yourself, I'm going to write a sentence. And as you start feeling more comfortable, maybe move up to a paragraph. And once you feel comfortable with the paragraph, move up to a vignette. So, and I would also tell people, don't share your early writing with people, because again, criticism can destroy a writer. I say just create, shut everything and everyone out, and just write.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
When you take time to read, just for you, you stick with those suspense horror genres, or what genres do you like?
I actually don't read much contemporary horror. Which I probably shouldn't say, but I really don't like much contemporary horror. I think it's I don't particularly find it a lot of what's being written right now like to my interest. So a lot of what I do read just tends to be, at least right now, I'm reading just a lot of fiction, a lot of literature. I'm reading a lot of like classics right now, and poetry. That tends to be more of my personal interests. So
Okay. Yep. I mean, makes sense.
Yeah.
Horror sometimes it just depends. Like I
It
try to
depends.
avoid it for myself because of the ick factor. Like there's too much ick sometimes.
I'm not a big, yeah. I mean, there are some gruesome things, and I'll admit there are some gruesome things in my writing, but I've never been interested in like an ongoing like assault of gory things. I'm more fascinated with, and the way I've told people is like, I like to explore haunted things. I like to explore memory and remembrance and like violence, and what does a violent act that happened 100 years ago, how does that ripple across through time? So those are the types of things that I'm interested in, which is weird. So I kind of like am horror adjacent, I think. Not traditional horror, I think, in the sense of what we think of horror.
Right. That makes sense. If people want to know more about you and your books, website, and any social media that you're active on.
So I'm on my website, cynthiapelayo.com. And in terms of social media, the easiest place to find me would be Instagram for like updates.
Okay, so thank you.
Cynthia Pelayo, author there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Cynthia, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure you highlighted or talked about during this time?
Oh, just a quick update. I have a few things being re-released this year. I have Loteria, which is my short story collection. That's being re-released next month. And then Children of Chicago and The Shoemaker's Magician are being re-released as well, and those will be available in October.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you so much for taking time today to talk to me about Vanishing Daughters and about writing in general. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
I was just thinking, well, first of all, thank you again to Cynthia for joining me to talk about Vanishing Daughters. When I spoke to her the weekend of the interview, I was about halfway through the book. I hadn't had time to finish it, and I have since finished it. And I'm actually really glad that I hadn't finished it yet, because there were so many things that I wanted to ask her about that would have been completely wrong to ask for a book like this, because it would have been spoiler city. Like, I just wanted to be like, okay, but what about this? And then where was this inspired by? And this, and it would have given too many things away. So actually, it's a good thing that I hadn't finished it. Although I'm always worried when I haven't finished a book that I'm going to say something really stupid, like the time I was gushing about a character and then they died like 2 pages. Literally like a half an hour after I finished the interview, I started reading and that character died. And I was like, no! Anyway, I admitted to her that I was only halfway through, and why is my phone going off? I turned it down and just asked her to let me know if I said something that was going to, that I didn't know the answer to yet. Anyway, there are a lot of layers, as I said, in this book. If you're a fan of supernatural, then this is a book to check out. But also, if you're a fan of thrillers, if you're a fan of crime fiction, if you're a fan of true crime fiction, because there is an element of true crime in this. There are the 51 women who are strangled. Those are actual unsolved murders in the Chicago area, as Cynthia was saying. So there's that true crime element. There are urban legends. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is an urban legend in a lot of different places. Probably you heard that story as a teenager in some variation, right? I know I did. And it's shown up in, I think it even might have shown up in the TV show Supernatural. I could be wrong. Don't yell at me if I'm wrong. But you hear the variations of that story. So there's a lot of different layers. There's a lot of different entry points into this book. So it might be one that you want to check out. Or maybe you have a book lover in your life who loves one of those things, and you want to get this book for them. Also an option. But definitely check it out after listening to Cynthia if this is something that sounds interesting to you. Next time we have more crime fiction, another thriller, another serial killer, actually, interestingly enough, but a very different book. So next interview, I will be talking to Mark Stevens about his book, No Lie Lasts Forever. Again, a few different layers going on in this with a couple of different threads coming together, but there is a serial killer in the Denver. We're in Denver. We're still in the western, not the Midwest. We're in the West. I'm going to shut up because apparently I cannot speak today, and my geography is bad. Chicago, now Denver. There was a serial killer, active and then inactive for 18 years, and then suddenly reappears. But did they? Is it a copycat? So join me for my conversation with Mark about No Lie Lasts Forever on the next episode. In the meantime, I hope that you are having a great week so far. Hope you had a good weekend, that it gave you whatever you needed it to give you. I lost my train of thought. What is going on with my brain today? Seriously, you might all want to be worried about me. I hope you're having a good week. That was really my whole point. I hope that, as always, if you're a fan of this podcast and you haven't done so already, please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching the episode on. Helps the algorithm. Another big help to the algorithm is to leave a positive review. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance if you're going to do it. Thank you already if you have done it in the past. That is awesome. I appreciate it. Also, you can follow the podcast on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Come find me, ask me questions, tell me about the books that you've read from the authors that I've spoken to. Just tell me all your interesting book facts. I love to hear them. Again, I hope you're having a great week. Whatever is going on in your week, though, first, I hope your brain is being more cooperative than mine is, and I hope the universe gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to